Well, we are starting to get the first indication of voter reaction to Trump's conviction. A Reuters poll that came out today suggests that Trump is losing some support. 10% of Republicans indicated they are now less likely to vote for Trump. And for independent voters, it's a bigger number. 25% say they're less likely to vote for the former president. For more on this, I'm joined by Charles Chamberlayne. He's a former Capitol Hill staffer and a political analyst. Charles, it's good to meet you. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to see you.
This Reuters Ipsos poll shows Trump's losing some ground from Republican and independent voters. How do you see this affecting his chances in the run for president?
I've actually been looking at a number of polls across the country, and the race is still very tight. I think the best aggregate poll that I like to look at is the 538. Everybody can go to 538.com, check it out. But right now, Trump is at 41.1% and Biden's at 39.5%. And that's a combination of several different polls that are running across the country. Trump is leading by 1.6, and I'm 1.6 points. And I'm finding that he is still leading in a number of these polls. This Reuters poll is fairly new. Look, it's going to take some time before it settles with voters, before it settles with people, and it really settles into, and they really get a grip on what exactly just happened. But I think the race is really, really hardened between Democrats, Republicans, between pro-Trumpers and never-Trumpers. So this is just more of the same, I think, in terms of American politics.
Well, yeah, American politics, I don't know if anything is ever the same in American politics, Charles. It changes so dramatically. But, you know, you've worked for some Republican politicians in your day. They seem to be galvanizing. I mean, how do you see Republicans reacting to this verdict?
I'm seeing a lot of Republicans on the Hill getting behind Trump. I think there was just a notion that was put forward by members of the Senate that said, look, we're not going to vote on anything outside of defense spending. We're not going to move forward until this case is done and over with, and Trump is not penalized. I've yet to see where that's going to go. It was just introduced today by a number of members vying for either leadership in the Senate and or to be a VP with Trump. But again, I think you're seeing Republicans do what Republicans do best, and Democrats do what Democrats do best.
Trump's campaign is using the verdict to their advantage, at least when it comes to fundraising. Apparently, they have raised, reportedly, and we won't see the confirmation of this in a while, $34.8 million in the 24 hours. And for context of people at home, that is larger than the spending limit for a national level campaign in Canada in a federal election. And he raised that in American dollars in 24 hours. I mean, where do you see this going? How do you see the Trump campaign using this?
Look, and I think I've said this from the beginning. Republicans are hardened on Trump. The ones that are MAGA or Make America Great Again, Trump Republicans, this is just going to force them further in the direction of supporting Trump. So they're seeing this as a great revitalizer, a way to really energize the base of their voters, the base of their donors, and get them out. For the folks out there in Canada, this is the equivalent of saying, like, either you're a rap fan or you're a country fan, you're a Drake fan or you're a Kendrick fan. Just because there's an issue with one of your favorite country or rap artists doesn't mean you're all of a sudden going to start liking somebody who's completely different, right? Yeah. So this is just where America is right now. Very, very divided. This is going to galvanize Democrats on the left, and it's going to galvanize Republicans on the right.
But Charles, it's the independents where this election could be won or lost, right? That was the
Absolutely.
way it was last time, right? And already there's a mobilization over Roe versus Wade potentially happening with young, women in particular, and in college towns. And when I know it's only one poll and things change dramatically in U.S. politics, but when 25% of independent voters say they're less likely to vote for him, I know the top line numbers are what they are, but with the Electoral College, a 1 in 4 shift to the negative potentially, that's got to be worrisome to the Trump campaign.
Yeah, it's really the presidential race. In the primaries, they run to the right or run to the left, conservative or liberal. But when you come to the general election in America, it's all about running to the middle. Yeah, and it's about that small fraction of voters who haven't made up their minds and are trying to figure it out, they're the ones that really matter. So the small percentages really, really do matter. I think in the poll that I saw was the NPR PBS poll, which is a nonprofit media organization in the U.S. 11% of independents said a guilty verdict would make them less likely to vote for Trump. That's huge, right? So if you're on either end of the spectrum, it doesn't matter so much. But the folks in the middle, which really, really count, this is really, really important.
And I wonder too, Charles, Joe Biden put this statement out on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, saying Donald Trump is threatening our democracy. First, he questioned our election system. Then he questioned our judicial system. And now you can stop him. I know there's been a disillusionment with Biden because of the economy, the Middle East, and maybe a motivation issue. This feels like it might be something that might motivate Democrats who are a little bit worried about things. How do you think it could deal with Biden's softer support?
Potentially. I don't think this message is any new. He's always been saying that democracy is at stake. I think right now the election comes down to what it always comes down to is when you're going to the grocery store, how much are those eggs? How much is that bacon? For those of you that love bacon, how much is that toilet paper? How much is it to put gas in your car? How much is it to charge your car, right? These are those bread and butter issues that everyday people deal with. At the end of the day, when they're going into the ballot box or when they're filling out that ballot sheet, that's what matters most.
But, we've never had an election where I guess one of the ballot questions could be, do I want a convicted felon in the White House? And that's the reality right now, right? I mean, that has to change the mental calculation somehow, doesn't it?
Well, again, I think the Republicans think, and they've thought along, and I think Trump has done an excellent job of messaging this, is that the whole thing is a sham. It's been rigged. The judge is he's crooked. And in my world of communications, the way that you get a message through is to repeat it over and over again. If I say the CBC is an awesome platform, and I keep saying it over and over again, eventually people are going to say, yeah, that awesome platform that you're talking about, I should tune into that. And so that's what Trump's been doing with that messaging. And it's been effective with his Republican supporting base. On the other hand, Democrats, they've been messaged to, and listening to Democrats, listen to various different networks that are not necessarily the most balanced. And they're hearing that, Trump has got a problem and that, democracy at risk. So I don't think the message has changed. I don't think it's that much of a game changer because he's been saying this for the last, 5 years maybe. But we'll see. We'll really see. Like you said a little earlier, it comes down to that messy middle that everybody's trying to go after right now.
Well, Charles, your messaging about the CBC would also have the benefit of being true. So feel free to say that wherever you want. And thank you so much for joining us here on Power and Politics. It was a lot of fun. Charles Chamberlayne. Thank you, sir.
Anytime.
How are members of his party reacting to this conviction? Well, we got a statement from U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson after the verdict last night saying the weaponization of our justice system has been a hallmark of the Biden administration, and the decision today is further evidence that Democrats will stop at nothing to silence dissent and crush their political opponents. President Trump will rightfully appeal this absurd verdict, and he will win. For more on the Republican reaction, Kadia Goba is a political reporter with Semaphor. She joins us now from Washington. Okay, Semaphore's reporting today describes the mixed responses from the GOP as a taxonomy of rage in terms of the reaction. I love that phrase. Can you break down the types of reactions you're seeing and hearing from Republican representatives and senators on this?
Sure. Many of the members of Congress echoed exactly what Speaker Johnson said. Some of them accused the Biden administration of, undermining the courts. Some of them have accused him of interfering with the election. And many of them said that the process was entirely rigged. This is not surprising because we saw this, every time there was a charge brought against former President Trump. So it was very expected that this would be the reaction. I do have a couple of members who kind of stayed silent. I would probably add that they are part of the moderate group of members of Congress where they just didn't say anything.
There's some, though, we saw saying, hey, it's time for red state attorneys general to fire up the courts and start going after people. So, there's the conspiracy sort of rigged system. There's the calls for it being retaliated. We're seeing this broad range from Republicans. What about the reaction from the Democrats, the White House? Biden seems to be going a little bit low key on this. How would you describe it?
Yeah, and to your point, there is a committee called the Weaponization Committee. They've already, sent out letters to Attorney General to Bragg, saying that he should appear before the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Democrats had a very different temperament around this. I expected a lot more fervor and, aggressiveness, and they were very tempered. They focused a lot of their attention around the actual court system, saying that no one, including Donald Trump, is above the law. That seemed to resonate throughout, members, rank and file members to leadership. And I did get my hands on a memo that basically talks about or directs them on what they should be saying. And it also was very muted, followed what Biden was saying, that we should focus on the justice system and kind of bolster the justice system without too much criticism.
Yeah,
the actual content of the case.
Yeah, that's kind of what we saw from the Alvin Bragg when asked to respond to the political. He said, we're going to let, our work in court speak for us. We spoke about the independence of the prosecution system. And it seems like the politicians are taking the same approach because anything overtly political fuels the narrative, right, that the Republicans are putting out there. And you've got Jim Jordan, major player in the Republicans, who you said he wants Alvin Bragg to appear before the GOP Judiciary Committee. I mean, what is the reasoning behind that to drag the district attorney in before a committee?
The letter was pretty vague. They said they just want to talk about, the prosecution and what happened. So we'll see. They have until, I think, the 13th. They're asking them to come into on the 13th, and they have until June 7th to respond. When I reached out to Jordan's team, they said, I said, what if they don't respond? And their response was kind of like, well, anything is on the table. So obviously that probably means they could issue subpoena. They do have subpoena powers, and we'll see if that, is the route that they choose to take.
Okay, so when you look at everything that has happened in, 25 hours, I think, since we got the verdict, 25 hours and about 20 minutes. I mean, what do you think this signals about what is to come in Washington and in U.S. politics in the coming weeks in this political arena?
Well, I would add that both campaigns have used this as a marketing opportunity and are fundraising. I think earlier this morning, the Trump campaign released a statement saying that they've already raised $34 million. I spoke to a member of the Trump campaign about an hour and a half ago. They say that number is up to 40 million, and they raised about 250 million within the first 2 minutes. So I would argue that it is, going to be a tool that further propels more fundraising within the coming weeks.
Yeah, a galvanizing moment in both directions. Kadia Goba, political reporter with Semaphor. Always appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.